because I'm on like a really tiny computer.
All right,
It
let
really
me
couldn't
drag.
really work.
I'm gonna have to pull it up.
I need to get a new monitor. That's my goal. I used to have like 4 monitors set up. That was pretty nice.
Let me
Did you
see
guys ever post a reminder in like Teams?
if this works.
Did we? Did you post a
Oh, shoot, you
reminder
can
in
choose
Teams?
which tab you share. There we go.
I don't remember if we did or not. We'll wait a little bit more. We'll wait until maybe more like 6:05.
Okay, can you see it, Brian?
Yeah, I see it.
Sounds good. I'll stop sharing it though. If I can figure out how to do it. There we go.
How's everyone doing? Pretty well.
Neha and I met twice today for meetings. This is my 3rd time seeing her.
That is true.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
I feel
I
bad,
think
Neha.
I'm surprised we
Yeah, I
got tired
know.
of each other.
Neha's probably like so excited, spending time with you. So you're about to leave soon, and you're like, oh god,
Listen,
another
you
meeting with
won't-
her.
I am.
See?
I'm counting down the days till I have no more meetings with you vultures.
That's sweet.
Days into the dunk tank.
No, please don't. It just make Vincent go up on it. Also, Neha, plug the sign up.
Will do on it.
Yeah, just drop a link in the comment box or something. This is a quality presentation that Brian and I have put together here.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't like, oh wait, we have this coming up.
No, not at
Probably
all.
just-
I think we met like 10 times working on it at least. Mhm.
Absolutely true. Absolute fact.
I think we can go ahead and get started soon if you want.
I mean, I can count the number of people in here on 2 hands, so I imagine we can wait a little bit.
All right.
Because like Trinity's not here. I don't know if she comes to these. Does she? I mean, I don't. The only reason I'm here is because I'm presenting. So.
All right, so Trinity doesn't. Does Doug come sometimes?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I remember during
All right.
exec interviews, they're like, "How many huddles did you go to?" And I'm like, one. I went to
All
more
right.
than Haverty though, so I call it a win.
What is this sign up for? Oh yes, guys. Before we present, we have another Backpack Buddies event coming up this Thursday. Make sure you sign up for it. Fun.
You should sign up for it. Look at all these fit people that aren't here. Excellent. Wow, I know how they feel about us. Damn.
All right. Looks like they're gonna get an email soon.
You didn't show up to the huddle. How dare you?
We know that you have
Should we
been
wait?
missing.
It's already 5 minutes in. Okay, what do y'all want to do? Do you want to wait or do you want to hear it? I get a head nod. I don't know what that means.
Just go for it.
Let's go for it.
Go for it. All right. So our presentation. Oh, wait, I need to share it. Anybody here? Can y'all see it?
Yes.
Trying to pull up my Teams so I can see y'all while I'm talking. Okay. So we did food insecurity after the COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously it's by us. So the first photo we have here, it's talking about food insecurity before the pandemic struck. So this was May 2020. So we were sort of in it, sort of not. It hadn't really taken full effect yet, I don't think, until closer to the summer. So among food insecure people, 45% had fair or poor physical health, and then 14. And you can see the percentages of food insecure, or excuse me, of mental health and physical health ailments were higher among food insecure people than food secure people. And that's basically what this slide covers. It's just saying if you combat the food insecurity within a community, it effectively combats some physical and mental health issues within the community as well. Here's some non-health related COVID statistics and then how they impact food insecurity. So basically, as jobs started to decline, a lot of lower socioeconomic jobs are related to manufacturing. So, of course, with the decline of manufacturing jobs, a lot of people lost their jobs, as you can see in the third image, where joblessness skyrocketed during the pandemic. And in the middle, you can see that students were having a hard time finding jobs out of school. I know this is true because my brother graduated. He actually graduated in November. So he was looking for a job and he was having a really hard time because a lot of employers still weren't looking for employees at the time. So a lot of people fell into a state where they needed food help and that they became food insecure because they had no work and they were unemployed. And also, yes, the middle images of Canadian data.
All right, so the majority of research focused on food insecurity has shown that being food insecure brings a lot of increased risk for some health issues. This is primarily due to the fact that being food insecure, hungry, and having poor health are very closely related. Remember, Katie, another fit exec who's not here at the moment, told me you can never you can never replace a lost meal. And that really is true. You can't make up those lost nutrients, those lost macronutrients, those macromolecules, vitamins, calories. When you miss a meal, they're gone forever. And when you miss consistent meals, it's going to start affecting your health. And so food insecure individuals are at a huge increased risk for birth defects, diabetes, hypertension, cognitive problems, anemia, poor immune systems, high blood pressure, anxiety, decreased growth, and overall poor health. And this is a long list. So you can see these people are very, very prone to a lot of poor health issues. And that last bullet point right there, challenges education. That's not a health concern, but it is one of the most important things affecting food insecure individuals, especially kids. Meals are extremely important for growing children, and missing meals consistently is extremely alarming as it poses a serious threat to a child's learning capabilities.
Sorry, I forgot I had control slides. I was waiting for someone to click, and I'm like, wait a second, that's me.
I'll give you a heads up, that's fine. So, unfortunately, child food insecurity has spiked at an alarming rate due to COVID in the past year. In 2019, the Texas child food insecurity rate was around 21%. That would put us in the middle of this marker right here. And at the end of 2020, it was nearly 32%. So we jumped all the way up to the worst state of food insecurity possible. So that also means that children in grades K through 12, every 1 in 3 children suffers from some form of food insecurity, and that's a huge, huge, like awful statistic that I did not really realize until I was researching this. And it's kind of insane how shocking that really is for Texas. We are one of the worst states when it comes to childhood food insecurity, and that's just unfortunately a reality that we're going to have to change with a lot of hard work. Next slide. So addressing this problem of rising childhood food insecurity varies region by region in Texas. But for the Houston area, we're fortunate enough to have strong partnerships between the Houston Food Bank and HIC, for example, that were able to quickly mobilize to provide a lot of meals and distribution sites for families in need at the beginning and during this pandemic. Currently, there have been around 70 citywide food distribution sites at HIC schools and parking lots that have provided food to nearly 80,000 families, and that includes millions and millions of pounds of food for these families in need. And this graph right here shows some of the distinct locations in 2020 to 2021. As you can see, there's a huge amount of shops all around the Houston area. So if you are someone in need, it is relatively simple trying to find one of these sites. They are readily available and open on most weekdays. Next slide. So at the beginning and even now of this pandemic, food banks such as the Houston Food Bank that we closely work with for some of our events have been committed to serving people during this difficult time. But that doesn't mean that they have done so without their own share of problems. Since the Houston Food Bank and many others often rely on getting a large portion of the food from local grocery stores such as HEB or Walmart, the beginning of this pandemic made it very difficult to sustain the amount of food that they were used to getting. This was largely because due to the fact of consumer panic during the start of the pandemic. As supply chains have slowed down and had to adapt to this new situation, food prices rose nearly 20% according to the World Food Bank in 2020. So that means things like bread, meat, eggs, and other basic items were all of a sudden massively bought as a panic by a lot of high-income families. I know, for example, my dad converted our attic to like a makeshift pantry and just started hoarding a bunch of food because he thought grocery stores were going to shut down indefinitely back in May. And this puts a lot of stress on food banks and low-income families that all of a sudden having strain on the food supplies and food sources. So as we continue to endure the rest of this pandemic and more families are becoming more food insecure, there's a lot of new problems that food banks are having to adapt to. This, such as there's a new demand for more localized food pantries in the Houston area. We need to meet these demands with more volunteers, but it's difficult to because we are still amidst a pandemic. So it's difficult finding the amount of volunteers to help out. And overall, we need more food because more people are becoming food insecure. Next slide. So this image right here is just one of the ways that Houston Food Bank has adapted to the pandemic by setting up pop-up food distribution sites throughout Houston. This one right here is located near the NRG Stadium, I believe, in one of the parking lots. And you can see right there, there's around, I think that's 20 tents. So this one site is heavily trafficked and does experience a lot of Houstonians coming there almost every single day when they're operational. Cars line up early in the morning, and I live really close by this area, so when they are open, I can tell you like there is a lot of traffic just lining up near Almeida and right off. I think it's 610, just waiting to get into the site. But things like this is what's making Houston kind of more prepared to dealing with the long-term effects of COVID, and we have many of these sites all throughout Houston. Next slide. So COVID's burden on food banks, we already discussed it, but let's discuss some of the numbers now. So prior to the COVID era and this pandemic, the Houston Food Bank provided nearly 400,000 pounds of food a day, and that number has steeply increased to 1.25 million pounds a day. So using some basic arithmetic, we can see that we're now giving out 3 times the amount of food that we're used to. And according to Reginald Young, a chief strategy officer at the Houston Food Bank, the Houston Food Bank was usually prepared to serve 600 to 1,000 families a day. And now that number is 2,400 to 6,000 families daily. So using, again, some basic arithmetic, we can see that the Houston Food Bank is now serving 4 times the amount of families that it's used to, but we are also giving out 3 times the amount of food as well. We don't have enough food to meet this new demand of people, and unfortunately, as long as the economy is unrest and we're in the midst of a pandemic and we're slowly recovering out of it, this number is not going to go away anytime soon. The Houston Food Bank is going to continue to serving this large amount of families, and we're going to need more and more food daily to keep up with this demand until things hopefully eventually do return to normal, being called at that sometime within the next few years. Next slide. So there are some ways we can lessen this burden. I listed some of the most basic ways I suppose that we could do it. One is working more closely with grocery stores to meet the demand of food insecurity. So trying to create new partnerships and new deals so we get a certain amount of food to the Houston Food Bank so we can help more families and not have that stress on us anymore. We can also educate food insecure individuals on meal preparation, teaching them what type of recipes to make, how to cook new items, so just the food will last longer with less. We can also help some individuals to apply for federal programs like SNAP. SNAP is basically a federal program that gives a certain amount of food budgets to families, and it's a great program that already millions of people have are involved in, but unfortunately, and not enough people are involved in it yet. Because not a lot of people don't know how to apply to it. They don't know the beginning steps. That's something that we could focus on. Another thing is preventing panic shopping sprees by just keeping the public calm. I remember thinking about this great example with toilet paper, and I was watching a clip about that, where the news is saying, "Oh, toilet paper stocks are disappearing. Go out now. Go buy stuff. Make sure you're prepared." And those type of words and sentences, they create panic in people. And it's usually the people that have disposable money that are capable of going out and doing it, while those lower income families struggle to meet ends meet, especially now. And also, you can encourage yourself or your friends to just volunteer at a food pantry. Even if it's just for one day, you're still helping a lot of people, and your efforts are greatly needed, especially now than ever. Next slide.
So in preparation for future pandemics, Bryan covered a few things that we can do, and one of them I agree with very much. It's not being overly preppy at the last minute. I think it's great if you want to prepare for future issues and you can buy stuff ahead of time and in normal times when there's not a huge supply chain issue and a bunch of logistics nightmares going on. So if you stock up ahead of time and people are not encouraged to panic buy, like Bryan said, media words and inciting fear in people, you need to buy it now or else you're not going to be able to get it. That will help with the supply chain shock. And then of course I wrote here, it takes misfortune to learn how to prepare for most disasters. I mean, that's a true statement. There's no way around it. And ensuring that we utilize the lessons is critical, and it'll prevent this from repeating itself if we ever have a future pandemic or anything else. I mean, Hurricane Harvey was another one where food insecurity would have risen. And prioritizing the shipping infrastructure to move these food products quickly and efficiently is essential. And supply chain issues and increased food demand during these pandemics and Hurricane Harvey and other things, it causes the food insecurity to climb. So having food supplies in multiple locations, especially Houston has it set. Like Bryan said earlier, the Houston Food Bank has 70 locations you could pick up food from and pop-up shops and all this other stuff, but not every area has access to this. Houston has, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 7 million people living there or something like that. So they have a lot more people and they have more resources to prepare for things like this. But a lot of areas, even areas north of Dallas where I am, they have one central food bank, the North Texas Food Bank. They don't really have too many of the smaller branches. So if you're able in the long term to create more branches of the North Texas Food Bank or what have you in more locations, then people aren't going to have to travel as far to get food. They'll have their own storage of food, so they won't have all this they won't be running out because no one's going to be piling up at the main location. They'll be going to their own locations and giving out food there. And also another benefit of this I wrote in here is if you don't have access to food and water supplies because of something like our snowstorm that happened 2 weeks ago, since driving and shipping was unavailable, if you had closer locations, then you're able to solve the food insecurity issues because people could walk or bike or whatever to their closest food pantry rather than having to find the one main center that's far away from where they are. So while this is mostly tailored to the COVID-19 pandemic, these changes can also fix future issues. And then, let me go back one. I also wrote in here, I'm not quite sure if this is true, the Houston Food Bank. I mean, I'm sure we could email and ask them, but a lot of places were limited on the number of people they could have inside due to state mandates. So if you had a bunch of smaller locations, you could have more people able to work in those locations in a safer condition with the coronavirus rather than having a limited amount of people or too many people where it makes it unsafe and the virus can transmit to different people. So I would just talk about building capacities and stuff in the bottom. And then Q&A, and these are our dogs. Anybody have any questions? Sarah Grace?
Why would I have questions?
I don't know. You usually grill us about everything else.
That's for a later issue. Ask the non-fit people. Oh,
Any non-fit people have any questions? This is an exciting group we've got here.
I'm surprised Lauren doesn't have any grilling questions this time.
Okay, I usually have questions. I've been trying to think. I'm not sure if y'all covered this. I have to help someone real quick. But what do you think? How do you think you're going to have to address this? Like, how long do you think it's going to impact it? And like, how much has your operations changed?
Sorry, could you say that but a little bit slower? Just a little bit. I don't know. My Wi-Fi is.
Yeah. No, you're good. I talked fast. So how has your operations changed since COVID started? And how do you think you're going to have to address these inequalities in the future since it's been exacerbated so much?
So you're asking how have we changed the way that we do fit work during the pandemic? Well, we have a drive-through market now at Riverside where people used to come into the location. Now it's a drive-through. So people come through, there's pre-made packages of food that are delivered based on the number of people. They'll get a certain number of packages. We wear gloves, we have masks, we take all the necessary precautions, and we really distance ourselves from the people that we serve while we still have friendly interactions with them. And we'll talk as we're putting stuff in their trunk in the drive-through. We don't have that close personal interaction with them anymore. And at Reed, same thing. We take our precautions. We wear gloves and masks as well to try and limit the spread of coronavirus. And on top of that, if we do have any members that test positive for it or they're potentially exposed, we encourage testing in a safe manner. And they have to give us 2 negative tests in order to return to service, just to make sure there's no false negative or positive issues with that. And what was your second question?
What do you think the long-term effects of this will be?
Long-term effect, obviously, is going to be a food disparity because usually the minority is affected in a scenario like this, especially around the third ward community. So I think in the long term, we're going to need to have more support for the community, especially around Houston in the third ward. We need to have more support to those lower income communities, and we need to make sure they're getting what they need to get back on their feet. And after that, ensuring that they still have a stable connection to us. Anything you'd like to add, Brian?
I was thinking, for the long-term effects more, I think this really shows that while we do have like a lot of protocols in place, we do need better infrastructure in general with some of our pantries and the Houston Food Bank in general. Like, we can't just shut down every time something happens because every meal, like I said it before, every meal is important, and there's some families that rely on these pantries operation day by day, and we can't just, it's not right to just close up and say, "Oh, sorry, we'll come to you next week." I don't really know what type of logistic that would be, but I think what Isaac was saying, having more localized pantries that are within more walking distance for some of our clients, I think that's a great starting solution. So I can see will be exciting to implement sometime in the near future.
Absolutely. And on top of that, also, you would be limiting the spread of the virus, hopefully, if there was another virus. Well, if say you have another pandemic and we have the new infrastructure, because this isn't something that pops up overnight. It's going to take a hell of a lot of money or several locations to get this to work. But if you have closer pantries where people of those communities will work in them, you're limiting the spread because you don't have someone driving from Pearland. I'm trying to remember my Houston stuff. Pearland or Friendswood or something like, or Katy, and they're coming into Houston, which could spread it from Katy to Houston or Houston to Katy. If you keep everybody within their own communities and you kind of keep it isolated. And like Brian said, we can't just say, sorry, no, we got to, obviously we do have to protect ourselves. Our safety is kind of number one, but we can't be like, oh, can't do it. We just got to take our best precautions that we can. And we need to serve these people to make sure they get what they need. because, like Brian said, a lot of them do rely on the pantries, and it is very important. And food, like we talked in the beginning on the first slide, mental and physical health. I mean, it really relies on your diet. So if you have a good diet, or if you're food insecure, or a poor diet, or if you're food insecure, that can really have a lot of long-term effects that can create more issues than if we just got in the door and started serving food when we could. Excellent question, Lauren. And I like the hair too, like the color.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So I was wondering, is there anything that you learned through your operations within the pandemic that you plan on using like after the pandemic? Like anything you've like improved upon since the pandemic started?
Personally, I really like the drive-through idea. I also like getting to talk to people and stuff a little closer, but the drive-through is a pretty efficient idea, and you guys can weigh in on this too. In terms of like PPE and stuff like that, we'll just have to see how the future is, because if we get to the point where PPE really isn't required anymore, then we might scale that back. That'll just be the opinion of the execs, and we'll kind of weigh out, do we continue? I mean, we'll obviously use gloves if we're handling food, but do we need to wear the mask? It just depends on how things are in the future. Obviously, right now, masks are still a very controversial subject, as well as a very important measure of limiting spread. But yeah, that'll just be we'll cross that bridge when we get there kind of thing. But Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
So I am a freshman, so I haven't really been there at Riverside, seeing how it operated normally. But from what I see, I do like the drive-through aspect. And I mean, I might be wrong on this, but it seems like we're able to help more people more efficiently that way, because we get people lined up, we get them food, and they drive off. So it seems a bit quicker to me in that way. But I want to see how Riverside operates with close personal relations and interactions. Going back to the PPE stuff, I think when this pandemic subsides and stuff, I think it's also just the opinion of our volunteers who want to wear PPE and stuff. I could see, I mean, obviously we'll have gloves and stuff. I think masks are always important when we're working with food, but at the same time, I know some people don't like masks for whatever reason. That's something that just the exec group would discuss more about.
Yeah, it's just weighing current events and how things are going. I had something else to add to that, but I forgot. Sarah Grace, do you have anything to add in there?
I will add that the drive-throughs are a lot more efficient, but with in-person pantry, it allows people to be able to pick what foods they get versus us giving them a package of whatever we choose based on what the pantry gives. Because a lot of people who come have issues such as diabetes, and them being able to pick their foods helps them create a healthier lifestyle versus just getting whatever we give them. Because obviously we can't package it for someone specific because we're going through 150 plus families each weekend.
I do
Yeah,
agree with that too. There's always pros and cons to every form of delivery. Um, but I do agree with that, Sarah Grace. I do. They do get to pick what they want rather than, oh, here you go. There's pineapples and grapefruit this week, and all the other stuff that you get. We had a lot of pineapples. I was in Houston this past weekend, and I got to work with Sarah Grace and a lot of other fit members at Riverside, and I've never seen more pineapples and grapefruit in one place in my entire life before. Definitely a lot. Very efficient though. We got how many cars? Like 150 something
It
in
was
like 2
156.
hours. What was that?
156.
In 2 hours, about 2 hours once we really got into it. It is very efficient.
I think with the nature of the pandemic too, a lot of the food that we do get at Riverside is limited, because I mean we're just one of dozens of food pantries in the Houston area. I recall one of my times at Riverside where it was like towards the end of the day, and we had some cakes that we had to get rid of. So the last car got 5 cakes. And doing that type of stuff, it's not healthy and stuff. But I mean, we those are the types of food we get. We get a lot of soda pop, sometimes a lot of fruit. That's not always good. And sometimes, I mean, we don't get milk. We get orange juice. So it's kind of frustrating. But I think hopefully when the pandemic subsides, we can choose our food more um individual based, like, hey, we want more meats this week, or we want lettuce and cabbages, and hold back on the soda, give us more milk, stuff like that. I think would be nice to see for our clients to actually be able to walk in and choose what they want as well, not just getting a basket full of pastries.
Yeah, I think right now we're more on the we need to keep them fed kind of approach rather than we can really tailor what we give them or what they're able to have. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and Bryan was talking about, we have a lot of food that's perishable. So when we had a bunch of pineapples left, or was it pineapples or grapefruit? I think grapefruit we were giving out like 30 at a time in these little crates, like fruit crates, and we're like, you want grapefruit? Sure. Here's a crate of them. Figure out what to do with it. Maybe juice it and have a beverage later. But yeah, I think more selection would be a good deal, and that's something we'll definitely look forward to in the future once supply chain gets back to normal. Because there's still, even now, I mean, pretty much a year later, we're still having supply chain issues and logistics issues, and the snowstorm didn't help either. So all these little delays that we've been having, but hopefully things will get to more of a normal fairly soon. Any other questions?
I think y'all have brought up a lot of interesting points with that, especially in terms of like what products y'all offer, because you have to think like, do people in the third world in these areas actually consume grapefruit on the regular, right? Is that going to be part of their diet, or is it going to be wasted? And also in terms of what materials you get, like, can they put together actual meals with it? So I really like appreciate what y'all just said. But my question now stems more towards like the actual demographics measures. So like we talked about how COVID and pandemics like this tend to disproportionately impact low-income communities and like communities of color. But have y'all seen more people from like the food service industry utilizing this service, or not just at Riverside, but in general, to like reduce some food waste and stuff? And then also, separate question, has this pandemic exposed any like policy areas, like issues with the government that they need to solve in terms of food insecurity?
Okay, I'm sorry to say this. Can you repeat both those questions again?
You're
I'll
a
do them
little
one at a time. Okay?
echoey.
Yeah, it's like just slower, a little louder, and we'll be set.
I'm on my phone. So, has the demographics you serve changed?
Has the demographics we serve changed? Well, since the pandemic started, I've been home because of school. So my availability at Reed Riverside is fairly rare, but I'm trying to make it a little more and more because I mean, for me, it's 5 hours each way. So Bryan, well, he hasn't seen both sides of the fence. So Sarah Grace, this is a great question for you if you're paying attention.
I am. Specifically because Riverside is a church and they tend to recruit a lot of the people through like church and the fellow members telling each other through like word of mouth. Our demographic has not changed very much. We do see a little bit more younger couples and families, but still mostly is older African American couples or individuals that come to the Riverside Pantry. For Reed, that's an AHA question, but basically it's everyone that's in that housing unit to begin with. So Hoover's there.
With Nahal, how to dip, but for Reed, from what I've seen personally, it's a lot younger demographics, and it's really people with kids and children. It's still primarily African American, although, um, but it's a lot more focused like on younger couples or younger families, unlike Riverside, which is just like a service said, more of an elderly client base.
Yeah, it's always fun when they're looking for pastries and the kid's like, I want the cupcakes. Because we'll have like the little tiny cupcakes or like sugar cookies or something. But yeah, we do see a lot of younger people at Reed. I mean, before and after, because I did work at Reed before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And I mean, the younger demographic is still the same.
Okay. And then the second question was, has this pandemic exposed any like policy issue areas, like things that the government needs to do in terms of food inequality?
I heard policy issue.
Has the pandemic exposed like any policy issues? Yeah,
Of
what's
like of the FIT program or
Neha,
think she
that's your
just
answer.
What kind of policies are we talking?
Neha's not here. I think from what I
Oh, she
researched a little
left?
bit. Yeah, she had to go.
I can answer
From
this
what
considering that's what we're researching. Or you can answer it.
well, I'll let you take it too. But from what I've seen, unfortunately, food banks like the Houston Food Bank and stuff, when it comes to the funding or SNAP programs, other federally funded programs, it's all political. It sucks that it always boils down to politics, but it really does. So in terms of policy issues, I'm not sure if anything really been exposed, but it's definitely shown just if you want things to happen, you want things to change, you want someone to target certain things, you need to elect the right people. And it's not always the right people in office at the moment. So a lot of things just kind of get ignored or pushed away or kind of brushed. That's not really a big issue. All right, Sarah Grace, take it away.
So Neha, Alan, and I have been doing policy research with Dr. Belko in regards to this issue. And one thing we've noticed is Houston, even though we have a lot of pantries, we're severely lacking the types of additional help that we offer to these residents or recipients of the food. Specifically, like there's a lot of programs in other states where they have food pharmacy, where you or have a medical professional or nutritionist or dietitian help show you what foods to pick, what recipes you can make with it, and just more guide them hand by hand and monitor their progress over a term of X amount of months to check their health with monthly doctor visits and things like that, which I thought was very helpful. We've also looked into the fact that Houston in general, like we may have just food giving out to people, but it's not really enough. Houston Food Bank is very understaffed from what we see on our point of view, and they don't, because they're understaffed and constantly rotating through the staff, whatever measures they try to implement never really go through fully. So we're like, it's really bad in Houston and mostly in Texas as well. That's why I believe we had Isaac. What was that one org we reached out to this summer? I think it was like Fighting Hunger Texas or something like that. That also
Something
talks
like
about
that, yeah.
yeah. It also talks about like some of the policies that are used, but it's only in like the northern Texas cities. There's really nothing here.
It's because we got a handle around that. But we also don't have as many people to feed as you guys down there. I don't know how many people Dallas has in it. Houston has way too many people in it. It's crazy.
You're moving down here too, though.
I'm not going to be in Houston, though. I'm going to be northwest Houston.
The Dallas area actually has a bigger population than Houston.
Does it really? Well,
Yeah.
area. How big is the area?
7.5 million, and Houston 7.
It does not feel the same. I mean, I think it's just because Houston, like, if you've ever wanted to see urban sprawl in action, that is Houston. Because we have one skyline in Dallas. It's got that like giant ball on a stick thing. Reunion Tower, that's what it's called. Been in there once in the 20 years I've been here. And then you go down to Houston, it's like, which skyline are you talking about? There's like 3 of them. And then the zoning is weird. It's so huge. And it's so
one of the
chaotic.
problems though with Houston specific. We're like I think America's only large city that does not have zoning codes.
No, like next to Reed, they're running cattle next to Reed. It does not make any sense. And I'm like, what the? I'm like, I was so confused because like Dallas, you got your really downtown area, and then you have the suburbs around it. It's basically rings. You have Dallas, you have the rings of suburbs, and then you have farmland all outside of it. In Houston, it's just kind of, you'll have this really busy part of downtown. Then you'll have neighborhoods here and there, like River Oaks. That's the only neighborhood thing I can think of. And then you'll have a bunch of schools. It's just crazy how it's zoned. But yeah, I will be closer to Reed and Riverside, so I'll be working much more often. It's only 65 miles each way from our next house to Reed and Riverside. Any other questions?
I have a question again. What does your supply chain look like, and how do you think you can improve it in the future, like during the pandemic?
Our supply chain is Houston Food Bank, and personally, I mean, maybe Sarah Grace knows something I don't because she often does. I don't know how the Houston Food Bank supply chain works. I know we get pallets and we do stuff with the pallets. So that's kind of their deal. We don't actually move any products by ourselves. Anything you have to add on to that, Sarah Grace? I mean, I'm not discrediting you, Brian, but you've been around a year. So,
I
Sarah
mean,
Grace,
the
old
big
West.
people that fund our Houston Food Bank is HEB, Walmart, Kroger's, and they give us whatever is close to expiring or just not selling. And additionally, we also work with farmers with Houston Food Bank, so they have contracts with some farmers to grow X amount of product so we can have fresh fruit and vegetables and things for the customers. But in general, for FIT, we do not handle any of that.
Yeah, and I forgot about that, how we work with Kroger and HEB and everything like that. Those, so that's also their supply chain deal. So if people are panic buying, that's their shipping logistics stuff that they have to deal with. We don't have any part of that. We're basically reliant on Kroger, HEB, and Houston Food Bank and all the other sponsors that we have.
That kind of goes back to what I was talking about with panic buying. When this pandemic hit, people were buying any type of milk product they could get. So, people were buying, powdered milk when there's typically not demand for that. And so all of a sudden, a lot of different food supplies just got really disrupted and demands for random being shot up. And that kind of disrupted what the Houston Food Bank got and what they could distribute. And it still is disrupting what they can distribute now. That is a big problem, but we don't really have any say in that. I mean, the biggest thing that we can just kind of hope for is just don't panic the public.
I am all for being well prepared
Mhm.
or over prepared for stuff, but do it ahead of time. Don't just panic buy last minute because you think you're going to need it. That's where we run into so many issues. I can't even tell you. I went on the neighborhood's Facebook page and people were like, there's nothing in the store. And I'm like, and it's because all these people are buying stuff they've never bought before because they're like, I might need it. Even though we never had that big, I mean, other than people buying stuff out, we never really had that big of logistics issues during the coronavirus pandemic because truckers were still running, warehouses were still running. It's just all the panic buying that created the initial hiccups, and those hiccups are pretty big when you funnel it down to food insecurity because up top, especially a lot of our people in Bonner, like Brian said, his family was was buying stuff too. So those little hiccups, yeah, we feel those and we see, yeah, and I mean, my family like did buy a little bit in a panic, not that much though. But basically, we feel these hiccups in the supply chain, and when you get down to lower socioeconomic levels, I mean, those are big ripples that they're facing because that means they're not getting stuff from Kroger, HEB, and Houston Food Bank because everything's just gone all of a sudden when people need it most.
Yeah, and I just reaffirming what Isaac said. It's a good thing to be prepared. It is, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be prepared in time. But when you're just solely becoming prepared out of panic at the last moment, and you're one of 1,000 people rushing to your local HEB or Walmart, just putting whatever you can in the shopping cart because the aisle's still empty, that's where a lot of problems come from. And like I was saying before, um, some people like my dad, he had the luxury of doing that. Many families don't in the Houston area, and when panic hits, a lot of middle income or higher income families tend to forget about lower income, and that's something that also kind of needs to be addressed. Like, we need to make sure everyone has enough, not just congrats, you can build another pantry in your attic. What about?
Well, another thing with Houston too, Houston, because it is so big and it has so many different varieties of people, you have all these socioeconomic levels. And I mean, you have the highest of the highest, like oil people in most cases, and big business and all that. So you have a lot of those. And then you also have a lot of lower socioeconomic level people there. So you have all these people buying all the resources, and then you have all these people not getting resources. So that creates huge disparities too. In a more say in a more suburban environment in a kind of, I don't know, like Katy. I don't know much about Katy, But I'm assuming Katie's more like everyone's kind of on a level playing field in most cases. Then I think the effects are less profound there than when you have all these people buying this and then these people have absolutely nothing. And then you have all these supply chain issues. But yeah, we could talk on and on all day about this. Any other questions?
I'm just gonna add something what you said right there too about comparing Katie and Houston. If you, I know Katie, another exec in our group, she'll love talking about this. But if you drive down Old Spanish Trail or south of North McGregor, count how many grocery stores you see located like near the third ward. There's not that many. So it's not only a matter about, issues with money or just uh quantity of food, it's just accessibility to food during this panic time. People in the third ward or neighborhoods similar to it don't have access to supermarkets like the suburbs do, so they can't always prepare as much as other individuals can in the Houston area. And a lot of that does go back to who has the money and who doesn't in Houston. We do have we have some of the richest people in Houston and some of the poorest as well.
I think also when you look at this, and this is just completely off the spur, I'm just thinking about this. So we always talk about a lot of urban environments where people are losing access to food in these lower socioeconomic levels. I think this can also really go for it could apply to people in rural areas too, and they're just not talked about at all. And I think the reason is because most people in the sticks are really accustomed to preparing ahead of time. They have reserves of food because they can't go to the store that's 30 minutes to an hour away from their house all the time, like people who live closer to stores can. So that's why I think we heard less about rural environments in terms of food insecurity and more about the urban environments because people weren't prepared for something like this. It's kind of like us in the snowstorm, where people heard more about snowstorms down here than they do up north because we're just not prepared for it here. And it created more of an impact on us. That's just something I thought of. So. And if we have no more questions, then I think we're good. Anybody else?
Any last minute thoughts or anything? Any
Fit
questions?
girls, marketing girls. They know who they are.
Anything about the dogs?
Oh yeah, Jakey is Brian's dog, and Taco and Pepper are mine.
My dog looks old because he's like 14 too.
Taco looks chunky, and he is.
No, well, my dog's diabetic, so I mean, he gets insulin shots. We can go there.
All right. They have evil squishmallow eyes. Yeah, Taco is pretty evil. I mean, he takes any chance he can to pee on your stuff, so it kind of sucks. Pepper is dignified, though. She is a classy lady. Well, I think we're all good. Everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you for coming out to our presentation. It was a little smaller audience than I expected, but that was good because we got to answer more questions for each person rather than everyone just getting one question. And I hope to see you guys at the next one.
All right, thank you everyone for coming.
Have a good night, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, good job. Time to log hours.
It got so the presentation went by way faster than I thought because I saw all the stuff that you added and I'm like, this thing is gonna run over because I didn't think about like how long time actually takes. So I was like, oh shit, I hope we have enough. As we finished with like it was 6:20 and I'm like, all right, we're gonna have to stretch this Q&A session. I think we did a great job. It was 50
I think we did really
minutes.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
It was what, like 45 minutes? We started, yeah, I think that was fine.
That's
I
fair.
was
Totally
surprised
fair.
how fast it went.
And she was like policy, and I'm like, what policy? And I'm like, oh, I'm not even gonna get into politics here.
Yeah, I don't talk about politics either for a lot of reasons. But there we go.
Yeah, they're just super polarizing. I'm like, I don't want to mess with this.
Yeah. Exactly. All
All right. I'll see you later. Log your
I'll see ya.
hours, sir.
right. I will.
All right. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.